I dump your butt. Today we're going to talk about Stranger Things 3. Stranger Things, you guys. Season 3. If you haven't seen any of the seasons, do yourself a favor. Get with it. This show is awesome. I mean, keep in mind, it's dark. There's the horror element to it. That's all true. But we've talked about horror in this series. When it's done in a certain way, I'm a fan. And Stranger Things is no exception. One of the things I love about this show, this series in general, and definitely is pronounced in Season 3, is the blending of the cool kids and the nerds. What a fun, clashing dynamic, especially between Dustin, and I can't remember the little girl's name, but I love watching them work out their relationship and seeing what happens in the way that they negotiate mutual respect and partnership, because they start out just being super combative and derogatory toward each other, which is hilarious. And then in the series, their relationship progresses and they become like partners in crime in a good way, and it's really fun to watch it. And I had this moment like later in the season where I was like, these two characters are working together, we're seeing them like partner up and like collaborate. This is ridiculous, but they got us there. Like, they did the due diligence of building the characters and the development of their relationship, and we bought it, and it was awesome. I was like, they effectively broke down the walls of the age gap, the socioeconomic status going on between them. They legitimately showed us reconciliation and friendship, and that was a theme throughout the whole season, which is so much fun. I love that. I love seeing the exploration of friendship, especially at the young age that these guys are at. And it was crazy, too, because they would do flashbacks from, like, the first season, and the kids were so young back then. It was like, you don't realize how much they'd grown because you're so used to their new versions of themselves in the season, and then when you see what they were like in the beginning of the show, you're like, wow, they've grown a lot. It's crazy. So anyway, I loved watching the few different dynamics where they explored characters who came from the popular side of the world or were super nerdy, and you see them, like, build friendships and start to learn to mutually respect each other and understand each other and value the things about each other that, you know, used to divide them and make them feel like enemies. And then also there's this fun, like, coming of age feel going on where the boys are now starting to be into girls, you know, and exploring that and, like, working it out and, like, becoming more mature in their relationship pursuit and seeing just what that does to a young age, like a group of kids at a certain age and the social dynamics there. You don't see that explored a ton. And they do a great job tastefully, like, exploring that in the show, which is super fun. One of the things that I found super interesting about this season that I was actually surprised by on my end was there were multiple scenes where it was like a graphic, bloody, violent scene, or like, yeah, just like gruesome. And I wasn't grossed out. I wasn't offended. I didn't feel like, oh, this is disgusting. I mean, it was gross, right? You got the idea, but it didn't feel like you were getting slimed by it. And I was kind of surprised. And after I think about 7 episodes, I was like, you guys, I don't know what's going on, but like, we're watching some nasty stuff on screen and it doesn't bother me. I'm like, I was wondering, am I just unfazed? Have I become super desensitized to this stuff? Am I just watching a lot of nasty, violent stuff and I'm just kind of numb to it now? But I've noticed that several of the people in the room were experiencing the same thing. We're all watching something nasty and we weren't repulsed by it, which is weird. And then I talked to some other friends who didn't watch it with me, and they brought up the same response, that it was like gruesome and bloody, but they weren't like grossed out by it, which was so interesting. Apparently, potentially, it's part of how the scenes were shot, that it wasn't zoomed in and it wasn't like spelled out and, like, you know, drawn out. It was just like fast and to the point and just getting it done. So I love that this show explores like the science fiction and horror genre without having to gratuitously emphasize and obsess over the nasty stuff, like the tearing apart of flesh and the human frame being mutilated and blood and guts and all the things. Like, you have those elements without it being glorified, which I love. And so you get to watch these heroes feel like legitimate, believable heroes in their story that we actually can get on board with. It didn't feel super childish, but it did still feel playful and innocent in the midst of overcoming evil. I'm such a big fan of that. The spirit throughout the whole season was one of hope and overcoming and friendship and connection and victory, which is beautiful. And so in the midst of such a dark landscape and such gruesome encounters, we still have such a connection to the heroes. And at no point in the series did I feel hopelessness or despair or, you know, like evil was winning out. which, you know, and some people might not feel like a big win because like you want to be taken to this dark pit and then soar out of it. There are opportunities for you to go there, but by and large, the trajectory of the show was, we're having fun, this is an adventure, let's go. And yes, there are dark, intense characters to overcome, but we haven't lost sight of the light. I love that. And there was particularly this one scene where, or I think the scene happened a couple of times, but 11 is going up against Billy. Billy's like a demon-possessed crazy dude who was like a bully in season 2. In season 3, he's so much more supernaturally charged and like gruesome and kind of disconcerting. And they have encounters with him, and so it's been fun watching the characters come up against some pretty like daunting foes and seeing their responses and what they did, and it felt believable. I'm like, yeah, this feels like how that would probably go, and they did a good job as far as intensity and measuring that and scoping it out, which was fun. But there's a moment where 11 is fighting Billy, and she taps into his subconscious. You know, she can like go into people's minds or whatever. And she sees him as a kid and visits a few of these memories from him as a child, and you start understanding how he became the way that he was, you know, hard and violent and vulgar and whatever. And you watched his dad teaching him how to do that just by the way he was being abused. And you start just getting like an idea of where this kid came from and developing compassion for him. And so you get to watch 11 develop a compassion for this character that a bunch of other people just could not connect to. And so she ends up fighting for that child inside of him that she connected to, that she's like tapped love for. Like she was like, she cared about this guy to whatever degree. And that was motivating her willingness to stay her hand, because Elle's like one of the most powerful characters in the show, right? She could throw the guy across the room, she could rip him in half, whatever. But she actually contended for, this guy's redeemable. Like, he can be reconciled, he can be restored, and she fought for that, even though we don't need to talk about what's going to happen. But I loved seeing that displayed. I think in the past, when I was younger especially, if I saw something like this happen, I just couldn't relate to it. I'm like, why are they doing that? This is so dumb. No one would do that. Just kill the guy already, right? Like, that's usually what my response was. But having walked through my relationship with love and seeing my response to carnage and dysfunction and people's breakdowns from that place, I totally get where 11 was coming from. I thought it was actually beautiful. And I love that one of the characters got to display what love looks like and how it actually covers a multitude of sins and still reaches for the person who seems so far gone. Like, love doesn't give up. Love never fails. And it's beautiful to see that. It was a precious moment. And in the midst of the craziness and the carnage and the fray of everything, 11 is still like looking at this guy with love in her heart and willing to fight for his restoration. Beautiful. I loved that moment. It was awesome. It actually kind of makes me want to watch the whole show again. Super fun show, you guys. I would highly recommend it. Keep in mind, it's grotesque. There are things in it that are not pretty. That's true. But the way the story is told, it is tastefully done, and it's inviting you into adventure, overcoming, hope. Worth it. And remember, you guys, when you're watching a movie or a TV show, you're never alone. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell button so you can get notified when we make other videos like this. What did you guys think about the gruesome stuff? Did it affect you differently than it affected me? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you relate? Let me know. Comment below.